So container gardening is a great thing to do. I'm going to show you some interior scape plants. I'm going to show you some of my plants that I've been cultivating for quite some time. They're kind of semi-bonsai, except I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'll show them to you anyways. I'm going to go show you some herbs, some veggies, some fall flower planters. The bottom line is you can grow anything you want in containers. You just have to keep in mind the final size of the plant and whether or not it can be minimized and grow in a container, or if it can spend its whole life cycle in a container and fit a usable purpose. So one of the things about container gardening is you minimize insect and disease pests. So for instance, you have this fall veggie crop. If this was just outside planted in the ground, you would have less control of the insects, disease, and especially pests. By keeping container garden close to your heart or close to your home or close to your balcony or patio, you keep a better eye on what's there. I guess you're kind of minimizing how much you're looking after, but you could potentially have 100 of these container pots and you might have a ton to look after. A lot of times, because these are elevated and put on tables or put on benches or displayed in certain ways, they're up away from a lot of the insect pests. Now, a lot of insect pests can fly around and they can get on these just as well. It's not foolproof, but you do minimize that. Especially diseases. Diseases come in from splashing of the rain, moving of soil debris. The disease is harbored over, like powdery mildew is harbored over in dead leaves and stuff in the ground. Those could blow in. If this is up and has a container, that's a little bit of protection for you. And also when I'm thinking pests, let's say you got that pesky deer that always comes into your garden. If you do a containerized garden, depending on how pesky that deer is, if this is up close to your house in close proximity, maybe the deer is not so interested in coming up right to the house. So those are just some things, benefits of container gardening, minimizing insects, disease, and pests. It's also back friendly. If I was working these plants down on the ground, I'd have that hunched over back look, and I tell you, I've done enough years of hunched over back breaking work that I can enjoy the benefits of working in a container plant. I just planted a couple of these. They're right in front of me. Just working right here. I'm not hunched over, I'm not bent over. Everything I need is right here. Also, you don't need large expanses of land. This is great for urbanites, people in apartments or small condos or townhomes, or even in areas where you have land, but it's like Yavapai County land. It's arid. The conditions aren't perfect. You have not been successful out fighting everything that Mother Nature throws to us. You still want to grow, propagate, and get your hands in there, all those therapeutic aspects of growing. Start with the container garden, start being successful, and then transition to larger or more containers. Okay? This is a great opportunity, and I'm looking at a pile of food. Grow your own food. I told you, and I'll tell you again about all these leafy greens that are in here. These would be great to eat. This container could be a salsa garden. It could have a tomato plant in here, a pepper plant, whatever kind of pepper plant you want, like a ghost chili, that special kind of pepper that you want to keep watchful eye over. Spice up your salsa life. Garlic, onion, cilantro, whatever else you want to put in your salsa pot. You could plant that in here, cultivate this, and harvest right out of it and make your own salsa. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great idea for you. That's a great idea to give to people. That's a great idea to start your own business and start selling those. Let's put Home Depot and Lowe's out of business with their wimpy little container plantings. And another thing too is I'm showing you this one. I just planted this. It doesn't look great. In 2 weeks when this starts to grow together, then if I showed this to you, you would say, wow, now that looks pretty awesome. All right, growing your own food. We're interested in organic growing. We want to know where our food comes from. If we grow it ourselves, that's the best way to do it. Container could have visual function, visual appeal, attractiveness to it. Could be a design aspect. I see that a lot in interior scapes. You notice I just planted these plants in here, but I didn't put any doilies or ribbons on here or 4th of July flags. You couldn't go crazy with container gardening, okay? And most anything can grow in containers. I'm going to make up some mixed combo container gardens We've actually been just working with the senior center in Chino Valley. We're putting on a workshop for them about container gardening, and so this is a continuation of that. So the first thing you want to think about in organic container gardening is, what is your soil made out of? Most soils for container gardening are made up of potting soil, some format of peat moss, perlite, depending on where you are in the nation or where you're going in the nation. It could be rice hulls, different types of bark from trees, and so a lot of regional products get put into the mix. But it's up to you to ensure, if you are going to strictly be doing organic gardening, to make sure that where your material is coming from is organic in nature. One way to do that is to compost and use your own soil. The only issue with that, so that in that way you know exactly what's in there, so that's good. The bad thing about that is the heaviness, the weight of it. A lot of container gardens are either meant to be set in place and left there. If that's the case, feel free to utilize mixes and stuff using real soil. And even the heaviness of the soil may be a benefit. But a lot of what you see behind me, these containers, these are meant to be lightweight so they can travel and move easily. Here is some kale in a 6-pack. Actually, this is a 9-pack. And so if this was really heavy and it was made with outside soil, the cost of shipping it and moving it around would be astronomical. If I was to fill this up with heavy soil from outside, I might not physically be able to move this around. For instance, if I wanted to bring it inside in the winter or change places. So what I did was I bought an organic mix. I know it's organic, but a lot of things are being touted as organic these days. So I'm not promoting this company or this stuff at all. I just wanted something a little denser, a little bit heavier than the regular potting soil. So I got this Patio Plus, Kellogg's Organic, and then I read what was in it, and it talks about the regional differences between what's in it. But for the most part, it's composted forest products. It's things like peat and perlite, and those can be sourced in ways where they weren't treated with anything, and those soils themselves then would be organic. What also comes with this is a little bit of organic nutrients. A lot of times it's poultry waste, and they've dried the poultry waste and they've let it age for a while, and they've added it in a percentage and then got the analysis on it that shows how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is actually in the soil. In my experience, it's such a low dosage and it's so slow release, I intend to add some additional on my own. And so I just, again, got an organic, all-purpose. This one happens to be tomato, vegetable, and herb. But like I told you in the fertilizer segment, I'm really just looking to see how much nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium micronutrients are in this. Again, this is a lot of bone meal, dried poultry, manure, feather meal, kelp meal, alfalfa meal, and potassium. And so this will go in a quantity into the soil to offset the future needs of these plants. This doesn't all become available right away. It'll become available as those plants grow. And so what I'm going to do in this container, I've already filled it up to a level that reflects the size of the transplants I'm putting in here. In this type of container gardening, I'm doing a fall veggie crop container. And so I've filled it up so that once I add my plant, the level of this plant is still about an inch below the top of the container. That'll give me space to add soil in over the top, but it'll also give an area for me to go ahead and water this plant. I'm going to plant this a little bit dense because I want it to look good instantly. This is something I'm going to give away to somebody. Obviously, one kale plant could grow and fill this whole pot. But we're going to do a combo. We're going to fill it up. We're going to cut leafy greens off of that because our season will probably end as we start getting really heavy freezes in early December, regardless of where you are in Yavapai County or in the United States for that matter. And so I've put the soil in here. I've amended it with the organic material, and I've worked that in. This said half a cup per 5 gallons, and so this was about 4 gallons of material in here. And also, since it came with some nutrients already in the soil, I reduced that and I added 1/3 of a cup of nutrients right in here. So as the roots grow down in, they'll be encountering nutrients as they go, and hopefully that nutrients will be released to the plant as the plants grow and get larger. Okay, so the first thing you want to do in your container combo is determine what's the visual front of this going to be. If this is going to be an entrance to a patio or along a walkway, visually you may see it from all sides. If it's a centerpiece on a table, you may want to see it from all sides. If there's one aspect, you look at it only this way, you'd want to progressively go from smaller in the front or even trailing down to bigger in the back. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the plants that grow taller in the middle, and I'm going to put the smaller plants around those. And so today I have a selection of vegetables. The easiest thing to do would be to grow your own vegetables. I showed you in an earlier video starting seeds from scratch, how you could do that on your own. I have some of those still here, and I could work those into the mix. But what I tried to do is get some larger size transplants to show you, and unfortunately I just purchased these. When I say unfortunately, it's because I keep showing you this kale plant, but I don't know that these plants were grown organically. And so I would venture to guess that these plants were not grown organically. So I'm showing you plants that are not my own, they were not cultivated by me, so who knows what kind of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides were used on these. But one thing I do know, and if that's important to you, make sure you understand that and think about that. One thing that I do know is that from this point moving forward, these plants will be grown under my tutelage, under my care and cultivation. And so what I'm looking for is the plants that are going to grow the tallest. In this case, I have kale and I have chard. Kale and chard, they're going to get pretty tall, so I'm thinking about putting those in the center. And so to take a plant out of a pack, whether you grew it yourself or whether you bought one, the easiest thing to do is put your hand on the edge of the soil, give it a turn upside down, a couple pinches, and then slide the plant out. Now, if this plant is rooted very intensely, you might just want to do a little bit of teasing out of the roots, and so the roots don't just spin in a circle. You want those roots to branch out a little bit. So I just did a couple little breaks. If you really tear this apart, you're going to start losing top growth. And so you want to do that very carefully. A lot of times people take a little small razor blade and make a couple little slashes on it just as part of their growing. These leafy vegetables have very shallow roots. Most times these shallow roots will grow out, fill the container pretty quickly, so I'm not extremely worried about it. But if you have a plant like some of those ones I'm going to show you, the longer lived plants, you really want to make sure your little seedling that's going to be huge doesn't have a root growing right around it that'll girdle it. So you just want to open that up a little bit. Keep the root ball intact, and in this case I'm making just a small depression and I'm setting the plant down in there. I'm putting a chard, I'm putting a kale. I might put another kale because I like kale. This one's pretty well rooted, so I'm going to give it a little tease there, a little pull on the side. Now I'm going to start working my way out. Here's where you have to be careful. I have some oriental cabbage, and if you just looked at this, you would say, wow, this oriental cabbage, that's way bigger than the kale. 2 weeks from now, the kale is going to be way bigger than the oriental cabbage. So you kind of got to know how the plants are going to grow moving forward. So I'm going to offset these on the side. And again, I'm planting for instant appeal on these ones, looking for roots. Instant appeal, so this is a little bit more densely planted than the norm. Some other things I have collards and I have broccoli. So this is broccoli, and actually collards are going to get quite tall, and so I'm going to put one of these closer into the middle to flank the chard and the kale. Now again, I'm just doing leafy greens for a fall container planting, and I'm going to come in and snip these leaves out as needed. Obviously the broccoli and the collards and the Brussels sprouts. Actually, these are Brussels sprouts. The Brussels sprouts will be taking the actual the product off of them, not just the leaves. But a lot of these are for leaf harvest. And so I'll be able to come in there and harvest what I need without ripping out the whole plant. Okay, so I got that. Now I'm moving closer towards the edge, and so now I'm going to fill with either trailing material, or in this case, some little leafy lettuces. This is oak leaf lettuce. I'm going to put oak leaf lettuce around the edge. And I'm going to use quite a few of these to fill in. And so now you can see the design of my container. These plants will grow fast to fill in. I'm going to take soil and come in over the top and fill in, straighten these up, fill in over the top. And it's just easier when you're putting this many plants in there. There wouldn't be any way to fill it up with soil, then dig in for every plant. And so I like to come in over the top, fill in around the plants, get those root balls buried. Okay, and then once that's all in, I'm going to give it a shake. That helps settle all the soil. And then the next most critical thing to do is water this plant. If this plant isn't watered, these are going to wilt, they're going to die pretty quick. And so water right away, not just setting it out, hoping that it's going to rain in the next day or two, because you'll have dead plants by morning. These leafy greens will show you when they need water. They need it frequently. And speaking of water, in a container such as this one or in some of the other ones that I'm going to show you, the volume of root mass in there dictates how much water the plant is going to need, and then the seasonality of the thing. This is going into fall, and so temperatures will become more mild and more cool, and you may be able to go a couple days without watering. However, exposed to the air, exposed to intense sunlight, exposed up off the ground potentially, you have the opportunity for this plant to become a little wind whipped, a little sunburned, and so provide some kind of protection. These plants that are in here would need about 6 hours worth of light a day, and so I would err on the lower side of things. In Yavapai County, we have intense sunlight. We have no problems with providing enough sunlight for plants. If you gave these plants 10 hours of sunlight a day, they might be scorched and scalded, and you may be tired from trying to water this thing 3 times a day to keep it alive. So right now, once a day would be good. As it gets bigger, that might be offset. You'll need more water, but that might be offset as the season cools down. That plant may hang out for a little while and do better under those cooler conditions. So I'm going to set this one aside. Now, one thing that I didn't talk about was choice of plants. And so this was a themed planter. That was fall leafy greens. I also have a themed planter that I just put together right here. And this has an ornamental fall grass. This is called Regal Mist. It's going to get a pink lacy plumage on the top of it, which is very attractive in the fall. It has chrysanthemums that continue to bloom. It has Dusty Miller to offset the color and the foliage. Now, I have a disclaimer. I'm not a designer, and I think more about the plants and what will grow well and how to cultivate them. But those of you with design aspect ideas, you can make beautiful interior scape container gardens. You can make a fall color planter that's way better than this because you have an eye for aesthetics. But what I did in this one was I put the height in the back. I put the mums that are going to bloom out this burgundy bronze. I offset the front with this green foliage, here with this gray lacy foliage, and then I have ivy, variegated ivy, that's going to trail out down the side of the container. Anywhere where I had more space, I tucked in these little dianthus plants, and what you have here is a plant that'll look great in the fall, but every single one of these things I showed you is a perennial that'll grow back from year to year. Now again, just one of these plants would fill this whole container, but for right now, this thing is filled up. It looks beautiful. You could give this to somebody for a fall arrangement, and it would look great for months and months and months. Going into spring and into summer next year, maybe the Dusty Miller starts to look not right. Maybe these little dianthus on the side are tired. You could take individual plants out of there and put back in summer flowers to fill those little voids that could potentially trail out. But then again, in the fall, you would have the mums, the grass doing its thing, and you have a nice fall combo planter. I just showed you 4 or 5 plants that are really good. There are hundreds of plants that would do the same thing that would look pretty awesome. Another thing that's often done is herb combos. This happens to have, I'll give you what I planted in here, sweet basil, purple basil, dill, mint, thyme, oregano, parsley, you name the herb, you can put it in a combo planter. This one, again, I did the design where the things that will trail are smaller on the side, the things with height are in the middle. Again, visually, you would see this from all sides. And this is a combo plant that you would leave outside. Even though the mint and the oregano and the thyme and even the parsley could withstand freezes into the wintertime, a lot of these, like the basil and the dill, they would need to come in the wintertime. And so what I would do in a combo like this, I'd either make a hardy combo with everything that could withstand, like say rosemary or lavender, that could stay out in combination with these, that could stay out all winter long. Or do it in a way that you just bring this in when freezing temperatures start, and this could be a kitchen window garden. And these plants, this basil is going to be this tall. This mint's going to be hanging way out the side. This is going to be an impressive combo planter. And so here's just an idea to get the creative juices flowing. You can do this organically. You have the right nutrients. You just got to water. Put it on a drip system or be dedicated to watering it every day until it really gets situated. If you're afraid that you can't water it, you're not going to put it on a drip system, use one of the cacti and succulent container gardens. They make some pretty awesome plants that you can choose to do that low water container garden. Okay, hope that gives you some pointers, and enjoy. Go crazy, go start planting some things in containers. Behind me are some of my personal plants that I brought in to show you for container gardening and what the reasons why I have them in containers. So here is my saguaro cactus, and so to give you a perspective, this is that might be 1.5 feet tall. I have had this saguaro cactus since I was in college, and so I planted this from a small seedling during my college days, and I've had it ever since. This is pushing 20 years old, and I have it in a container because it can't grow outside in this climate. So that's one reason for container gardening, having something that I can tote around with me and bring into a controlled environment. I've had this in my house for many years. I've had it on my patio for many years, and this winter I brought it into the greenhouse. Here in this container, actually it's starting to bust out of this container, so I need a little bit better one and maybe even a more attractive container. But this starting to lose its leaves. It looks like fall colors. This is a crabapple tree. I planted this as a seedling about 16 years ago, and so ever since then I let the seedling grow up. I chopped the top of it off. It grew new branches. I chopped the top of those off. Now it's almost like bonsai in this container. You see this nice structure that it has here, and every year it comes out and it makes a nice mass of pink flowers, and it gets its little crabapple fruit on it. And this tree is 16 years old, growing in this container. Now it's become kind of one of my special container plants that I keep around with me, and that's a great example of containerized gardening. Here's another one. This elm tree is almost just as old. I've been exposing these roots slowly over time. This one is actually in a nice low bonsai container to give that nice effect, that nice look. I'm no bonsai artist, but I'm trying to portray age with this tree, and I think I've done that pretty well. I even one year I cut off some of the bark to expose this dead looking part here, and so that the tree would keep growing. And so that's an elm tree, and this is my bonsai elm tree in a container. Now the container limits the growth, and the container also has to be watered very frequently because it's not very forgiving as far as root mass and such goes. But this tree could be kept for many, many years in this size of container. The aloe vera makes a nice container plant, and if you get a sunburn, you just take some aloe vera and wipe it on. Every house needs beautiful pothos clamoring around. Nice container plant. This may look like a terrarium, but to me, it's a container garden. A Schefflera, beautiful. An amaryllis that blooms every fall with gorgeous flowers that is practically newsworthy. A plumeria that purposely returned from Hawaii, no questions asked. This is my ficus tree with nice spider plant, variegated spider plant, hanging down out of the side. And I've had this ficus tree for many, many, many years. I started this from a cutting, and it was only this big. And I can see all of the scars and wounds of things that I've done with this tree in years past. I used to have chameleons in this containerized plant. Another pothos, and another pothos with some Tradescantia coming out of it. So just some more interior scape plant ideas. Okay, here's a succulent container garden. So here we have these fake look whiskey barrel, but this is actually styrofoam, so it's relatively lightweight, and it's got this fake buckle that goes around it. So this is decorative. And inside of it is a tropical type of agave, a jade plant, some type of crassula hanging out in there. And again, here we have more jade. We have a golden barrel cactus in here, and a different type of container. And so some of these containers are to bring inside because these things can't freeze in the winter. Here we have a seedless lime tree. So we always do the salsa contest at the end of spring semester in horticulture, and we always talked about we had plenty of tomatoes and onions and peppers and garlic, but we never had limes. So we started growing a lime tree, and now it's a few years old. It's in this decorative container, and so this can go out in the summertime onto a patio, and it could come in to be protective in the winter. And again, it's in this decorative pot. And to make this even more attractive, actually there's another nice lime there. To make this even more attractive, I could put ground cover plants, tropical plants, growing and maybe spilling out over this container. So here's our nice lime tree.